Our next speaker from the biology department is Siri Palreddy, and the name of her speech is The Promise of Plants.
Infectious disease is human civilization's oldest and perhaps most fundamental problem. From the bubonic plague to the HIV pandemic, and most recently with COVID, infectious diseases and the pathogens that cause them have shaped human history. Yet, for all its devastating relevance, infection, and more specifically, how we resist infection, is not fully understood. Ethically, it's difficult to study certain deadly infectious diseases in humans or other vertebrates. This is where my research on plants comes in. When you hear the word infection, how many of us first think of plants? Yet plants offer a uniquely well-suited system to study infectious disease. At its basic core, infection operates the same across species. So a question like, why were some people resistant to the plague or HIV while others weren't, can yield a very similar answer to why are some plants in a species resistant to infectious disease while others in that species aren't. My thesis focuses on how resistant individuals defend themselves against a pathogen at the genetic level. Using a plant species I'll refer to as the host and a pathogen that we know most hosts are resistant to, I wanted to determine whether all hosts would respond the same way in their genetic resistance response against the pathogen, or whether each host I studied would exhibit a different, individualized genetic resistance response, which would point to a much more complex system of resistance in this host and potentially other species. What I found went completely against the current theory. The individual hosts did not exhibit a uniform genetic resistance response. Instead, there was a wide variety of genetic resistance responses among the individuals, which tells us that plant resistance is not dictated by just one or even two major genes, but rather is likely reliant on smaller, combined effects of many genes working together. The value in using a plant system like this in infectious disease research is that it is much easier, much safer, and these results can be applied to better understand how other species, like humans, resist infection. We, as a society, are still extremely vulnerable to infectious disease. We saw this during COVID, and as our global environment changes, the threat of new infectious diseases will only become more pressing. However, if we can understand the genetic basis of resistance to infection, whether it be in plants or humans, we can work towards a future where disease prevention is possible in species and people we couldn't protect in the past.